So at the time of filming, I can tell you that Health Canada does not charge anyone with regards to product licensing or import licensing or manufacturing licensing for natural health products, which are the equivalent for the most part to dietary supplements. That said, the directorate that's been overseeing natural health products has been around since 2004. And they've always said that cost recovery is on the table because they can't just pay this through the taxpayer dollars. They need to get this money back from industry. And funny enough, they just pitched their numbers. It's freaking ridiculous. Okay, it's insane. And we're going to dive into those numbers very soon. Just know that this is part 2 of a 3-part video series on the Canadian natural health product regulatory requirements. Part 1 is around product licensing. Part 2, this video is about cost. And then part 3 is going to be the comparison of the Canadian regulatory framework with regards to the US regulatory framework. So definitely stay tuned for that. Now, there are 3 major activities that Health Canada wants to charge us for. And the first one is obviously product licensing. The fact that you have to submit your application, get it assessed, reviewed by Health Canada, they want to charge a fee for that exercise. The other thing is around site licensing. So if you want to import product, if you want to manufacture product, you need a site license. That dossier, that application needs to be reviewed and assessed, and that needs to be charged a fee as well. And then there's another fee called the annual right to sell, which is just an annual fee for you to sell a product, a natural health product in Canada. Now, in fairness to Health Canada, they are saying that for small businesses, the fees are going to be at a reduced cost. But I would argue that anyone that is smart and thinking about starting their own brand, you don't cost your P&L based on this temporary relief of your costs, of your fees. You want to price your P&L based on what the full price is going to be so that you are ready for the true cost of your business. And so with that said, we will dive into the cost structure would look like for a small business. But before we do that, I want to get into what are some of the numbers looking like right now. So the first thing is that if you are looking for a site license, so if you are importing a product or if you're manufacturing a product, it's going to cost you at least $20,000 a year to get that license. If you're a manufacturer, it's going to be around $23,000. But if you're an importer, $20,000 for the most part a year, okay, just to get the site license. This doesn't include product licensing or any of the testing activities or anything of that nature. And if you want to amend your site license, maybe you want to add another manufacturer, maybe you want to add another warehouse to this license, it's going to cost you $5,000 a pop. All right, so already you get a sense of where the numbers are at. But here's where things get even more interesting, okay? With regards to product licensing. And in video 1, I talked about class 1, class 2, and class 3, where class 1 is like the most simplified formula, simplest way to get your NPN license. And then class 3 is like the most difficult, right? The most unique formula. You have to get a lot more assessment and approval exercise or activities from Health Canada. So your licensing fees can start from $7,200 and it can go all the way up to $58,000 for a class 3 novel application, whatever novel means, but they're just calling it class 3 novel application. I also mentioned that there might be post-licensing activities in video 1, and that might mean that you might need to modify your dose or modify your formula, switch flavors. It's going to cost you anywhere between another $7,200 all the way up to $23,000 just for that, okay? This is ridiculous, and I'm going to explain why. But I'm going to do one more for you, okay? I'm going to add one more fee. That annual right to sell is going to cost you $542 a year. Now, if you've got like 5 SKUs or whatever, that might be, achievable and feasible. But for some brands out there that have hundreds of SKUs, that cost alone is quite significant. One could argue, but natural health products are under the subset of drugs and they're very unique in its formula. But at the same time, let's be real here, like a natural health product, apparently very similar to the conventional dietary supplement in the US space. Like what's the difference? I put ginseng, combine it with glucosamine and chondroitin. It's going to be a class 3 application. I can sell it in the US as a dietary supplement. And then for the most part, you're relabeling it, putting an NPN number, and somehow that's going to cost me $60,000 to license. It begs the question, like, Why is it so expensive? Luckily for me, I'm not representing an organization. I don't work for Health Canada. I can speak fairly freely, and I will say that word on the street, I've got a lot of colleagues in the network. Health Canada has just run this department like all right, bloaty, poorly managed. The director general has been like rotating. It's like a rotating door. People are just coming in and out. They don't know what the heck they're doing for the most part. And you can get that sense since day one. There's no industry experience, no industry point of view other than, say, the consultations with industry. But let's be real, they don't really factor that in to a significant degree, and definitely not in their day-to-day operations. And what has happened is they've just created a very bloated department that's inefficient, that had a huge backlog when they first enacted the regulations and executed this. And then they had to switch things over and create these new classes to streamline things. And they still haven't figured it out. Let's be real. Case in point, the performance standards, okay? So Health Canada says, well, we have performance standards for a class 1 and class 2, meaning, they're going to target this particular turnaround time for you. So class 1, class 2, you're looking at 60 days, 90 days, or whatever it is. And then for class 3, I believe it's like 180 days. But guess what? Those performance standards, and this has been explicitly mentioned by Health Canada, all it is just an internal target. We have no obligation to you as the applicant or to the consumers out there to actually hit those targets. So even when you pay 60 grand, they don't owe it to us to turn around and get the application in within those 180 days and get you your NPN. Nope, none of that's in there. So it's nuts, right? So you can just get a sense that people that had started in college kind of built this department up. They didn't listen to industry or really know how to implement that feedback into their day-to-day operations, and it's just ballooned. What they've been doing is they've been tracking that number. Well, how much has it been costing us, right? All the people that they had to hire and all the experts or whatnot, and consultations and travel, they put all this together in a number, and they probably realized it's a huge number, and then they had to back calculate and figure out how do we obtain this financial number through all the NPN applications that have been processed or are currently in process. And they come to this ridiculous number. It's such a deterrent. And do they not realize that if you hurt certain brands and they move away and exit out of Canada, they're not paying these fees. And as a result, no one's going to be paying the salaries of people in the NNHPD, right? The department itself is going to get hurt. They're probably thinking, if we do these high fees, it'll maintain our jobs, we'll still be there. Well, guess what? When that's so high, people are going to leave. They're not going to be paying for your healthy salary, right, to do these assessments, which, by the way, like I said, class 1, class 2 is fairly administrative. What the hell are we paying for? It's insane. I think this is pretty clear that this is the classic government department putting on their technical hat and just doing the math to come up with these numbers, but they're not factoring behavior, they're not factoring in the industry, they're not factoring the state of the economy, none of it. And that's normal. You see the same type of approach with regards to these applications. So they've been like this since day one. They don't care about how much these things cost you as a brand to do the testing or to do the fulfillment or get the site licensing or the SOPs and the compliance and certifications. They don't care. They're just like, this is what the requirements are and you have to do it. I get that, all right? When I put my consulting hat on, I totally understand that. But still, you have to factor in people, the people equation, the business equation, all of that has to be factored in. And the last thing you want to do is stifle your industry significantly, where only the big brands can survive. The Pfizers of the world, the large natural health product brands of the world, the Weber Naturals, the Jamesons out there, they can most likely absorb this. But anyone starting out, your profits are gone. Even if you do get the relief as a small business, eventually you're going to grow and then you're completely wiped out the year after. Which, by the way, we should talk about what the fees look like for a small business. So here's how Health Canada is defining a small business. It means that you have 100 employees or less, or you're making between $30,000 and $5 million Canadian in annual revenue. Now, I don't know if that applies to the Canadian sales or if you're a US entity and that US entity, the sales there that's driven by US sales, does it contribute to that 5 million? But let's just say you fall into this category. Well, for natural health product submission, for your first one, you get one free, like it's like the drug dealer, right? First one's free. Your pre-market evaluation, your licensing fees are going to be fully covered, 100%. After that, any additional licensing that you want done from them, 50% off. And then your right to sell, your annual right to sell and your site license, you get 25% off. I mean, it might help, but at the same time, I think any smart entrepreneur is probably going to be factoring the P&L based on the worst case cost recovery numbers. So we'll see where this nets out. There's a part of me that hopes that Health Canada has intentionally inflated these numbers, knowing that they have to negotiate with industry. There's a part of me that doesn't think that that's clever. And here's the other reason why I think that's the case, is because they didn't really give industry enough notice. They're essentially just going ahead with this, right? They said, with the exception of, I think it's a July date where we want to hear from industry, we're moving ahead. And by moving ahead, we're talking about 2025, which isn't that far away from now. It's May of 2023, a year and a half, which goes by just like that. You're in this pricing model. So I feel like there's something going on where they're trying to just push this through. They are giving industry a single opportunity to speak up. And so right now there's a lot of people in the industry organizations that's trying to rile up everyone to talk to the MPs and really try to address the situation. Because I think there's a lot of people in the industry right now, in the Canadian natural health product industry, that's actually scared, okay, about what this will do. And I'm not surprised, because when they enacted these regulations in 2004, that first few years was quite hard for a lot of small brands, and a lot of them did not make it. And I can see this doing the same thing. So we'll see what happens, but this is absolutely asinine, absolutely ridiculous. The numbers are crazy. I'm curious to see what's going to happen. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Definitely stay tuned for this video here when it comes to what your regulatory strategy should be if you're thinking about going into the Canadian natural health product space, and how it compares to the US regulatory framework. Until then, cheers.